if we're, dying more than we ever have as human beings, if we are more incarcerated than we ever have, if we are more disconnected than we've ever been as human beings, then what we're doing now is not working. We're the sickest we've ever been, mentally and emotionally. And I don't need to go into, rates of mental health and suicides and so forth across the larger community. But you look at the human being as what it is now and how it's evolved. We are the sickest we've ever been.
Boom. What is happening, beautiful people? Happy New Year and welcome to another episode of the Real Drug Talk podcast. Now, on today's show, we've got Joey Williams, awesome guest, Aboriginal man, and he shares his experience with culture and how that helped him in his healing journey with mental health and addiction issues. So really excited for the show today. There's some really key insights. And he even kind of challenges me a little bit on, how I talk about trauma and things like that. So great show. Absolutely loved it. We actually recorded this show last year. So there may be some references to 2023, but I'm pretty sure there's not. But we recorded this show last year. And we've had a bit of a break with some family stuff going on, but we're excited for the new year and to bring you plenty more content and more stories, a few different things coming in the new year as well. So subscribe and I hope you look forward to that. I won't bang on for too long, but I just wanted to let everyone know as well, due to some family stuff that's been going on in my life, with some sickness and things like that, we've had to close down the connection-based living services, which was a shame because we're getting some great results with people. So if you hear that on any previous podcasts, those services are no longer available, unfortunately. But there will be some educational products and things that you can access on Real Drug Talk in the coming future, courses, referrals to other people, things like that. But we're going to be focusing on content and putting out some good messages and some good stories and things like that. So I hope you enjoy. I won't talk for too much longer. Let's jump into the podcast. The one thing that you can do for me before we go in is if you want to stay connected, we're going to be focusing heavily on our newsletter where there's going to be some information and tips on recovery stuff if you want to change up some behaviors around drug and alcohol use. But there's also going to be plenty of stuff around drug and alcohol policy, commenting on, up-to-date news issues and current events, some stuff around some professional interviews that we'll do with people. And that newsletter is going to be going out frequently during the week, more than one time. So yeah, would love if you could subscribe to that. So it's for AOD professionals, anybody looking for some help or anybody that's interested in the space and in policy and in the sector. So really excited for that. So subscribe, it's all free. Links will be down below. But let's jump into the show with Joey Williams. Enjoy, everybody. Peace. I'm excited today because I've been trying to make this happen for a while, and somebody that we had on the show a year ago that I did some work with, who I think she knows of you. I'm pretty sure you know her. Her name's Kay Hull. She used to be a politician, and now she's from rural Australia. She said, Jack, you got to fucking talk to this guy. He's amazing. So I've been trying to work out how we can get a hold, and then, Instagram and all that happens these days. So here we are. So I'm excited to chat to you, mate. First of all, how are you? How you going? How's your day been?
Firstly, I've never heard of a politician or ex-politician speak about me like that. I guess us country people have got to stick together, mate.
That's right. That's right. She might not have said fuck, but she might have as well, actually. So I don't know. I can't remember, but it was passionate. I remember it was passionate.
Mate, things are good. Things are good. I'm down in Naarm at the moment in Melbourne. Awesome. Doing some different stuff down here. I'm back on the uni bandwagon. Back doing some study. So it's. I guess I'm someone who's always trying to challenge myself in different ways, mentally, emotionally, but then also intellectually as to what that looks like. So I've signed myself up for a PhD for the next 4 years.
Wow. What are you doing? What's your PhD going to be in?
It's the I guess the
Or the
the
question, or whatever they say.
the subject is in indigenous knowledges.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the reasons why we did things for thousands of years and
Yeah.
the reasons why they worked.
Yeah.
If we look at the challenges that we face in society as a large, I'm not talking our people. I'm talking the entire community. The challenges that we're having mentally and emotionally, and also spiritually. If you look at a people that did things for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they lived and survived in the same climates that we're in today, and they did it for thousands of years, then it probably leans into a little bit of what they did worked.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're dying more than we ever have as human beings, if we are more incarcerated than we ever have, if we are more disconnected than we've ever been as human beings, then what we're doing now is not working. We're the sickest we've ever been, mentally and emotionally. And I don't need to go into rates of mental health and suicides and so forth across the larger community, but you look at the human being as what it is now and how it's evolved. We are the sickest we've ever been. So looking at exploring what our old people did, what our ancestors did, not the practice. I won't be talking too deeply about what the practices is or are, but talking about why they worked.
Yeah. So interesting, mate. And
for the broader community as well. Our people have always been a sharing people.
Yeah.
Right? For thousands of years, we were over 500 separate nation groups that had similar but different stories in everywhere we went. We traded and shared food with each other at ceremony, song, dance, relationships, for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So looking at as a sharing people, what we did, and this is the broader community that can benefit from this stuff. I think we've been ripped off the past 230 plus years, being sold a narrative that the darkies that were here first were just dumb and savage and primitive, and all of that's, it's starting to be turned on its head now. And, I'm just using, we've known it's always worked. Now just using, I guess, the walls of the academy to bring these things to light.
Yeah, mate, so interesting. And for everybody listening, we had a false start trying to record this podcast, but I remember one of the questions that I asked you was, how important has culture, been in your journey to, recovery with mental health and substances and all that kind of stuff. So can you talk us a little bit through your story and how, that culture impacted it and, how it's kind of led you to be so passionate about what you're now doing your PhD in as well?
Yeah. So I've who I was then and who I am now are two completely different people. It's the beauty of, I guess, being in recovery for a long time. I'm 18 years sober this year.
Wow. Congratulations.
In December. Yeah. 18 years sober from alcohol in December. And, I can't honestly sit here, and it's an important point. I can't honestly sit here and say that I've been clean and sober as well, because, there was one time when I came back I was doing some work in the US.
Yeah.
And over in the US, I guess weed's illegal. It's legal, right? So I was over there, and then we're talking about the conversation around cannabis and legalized cannabis and what that looks like, and I guess medicinal cannabis and things like that. And I was like, I'd convinced myself, one, if I was living in America half the year, I'm not breaking the law over there. Yeah. And two, out here, I convinced myself that I medically needed it. Yeah. Like how mad we are when we're in a grip of addiction, how challenging it is. Our mind can convince us of these things.
Yeah.
So I had a joint. So I can't sit here that I've been 18 years clean and sober.
Yeah.
I've been 18 years without alcohol, but it's almost 8 years since that night that I sat down with some people and had that joint. It's a lesson to learn that the mind is constantly waiting for you to sleep. As far as the challenges of fighting the grip of addiction. So I've been through that for a number of years, but I guess I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous a long time ago. Long time ago, 19 years ago, because I went for about 11 months, and then I had a bit of a bust, and then sort of threw my hands up again and said, I can't do it anymore. And I guess who that kid was then, like I said, I was just a kid. I was 21.
Yeah.
So who I was then and who I am now are two completely different people. But looking at the rooms of what AA and NA did for me, AA and NA gave me the tools. I always say this: AA and NA gave me the ability to know that a life of alcohol and drugs was there, free of alcohol and drugs was there.
Yeah.
So it helped me get clean and sober, but culture has been undoubtedly the tools that I have that keep me clean and sober.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's all around, culture isn't just getting half naked in the bush and dancing, for people to look at or watch. Culture is deeply about storytelling. It's about connecting with deep values that are involved in those stories.
Yeah.
The intrinsic interactions and relationships that we have for thousands of years all comes out through those practices.
Yeah.
So it's learning to live with more humility, and a life of being involved with alcohol and drugs. And I've been clean and sober now for longer than I used, but I knew that it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
It was problematic everywhere I turned, everything that I did. If I didn't, go down that path, 18 years ago, first walking into those doors, or 19 years ago, I'd be dead all off that, without a doubt. Not because I was violent or anything like that, but because everything I touched, it was just problematic. Like the behaviors of what that was just followed me, with relationships, with family breakdowns, with poor form on the footy field, with all of that sort of stuff. So my life, without doubt, is a million miles better now than what it was, because of those tools that I have now that I've learned to live with throughout the practice of what culture is and how it's always been for thousands of years. Yeah.
So interesting, mate. And I think I said to you, like, through some of my work, and I hate that they explain it like this, but, through like bureaucratic processes, when they talk about, funding programs and models of care and stuff, they call it the mainstream system, and then, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders system, and they talk about the two different streams. And it's really interesting. Like, I hate how they talk about it like that, but I'm like fascinated by the models of care that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander stream of alcohol and drug support services comes up with, because it's kind of, they always go with a bottom up approach rather than like a top down approach, and it's always centered around connection and dealing with the underlying psychological and emotional issues before even thinking about like the substances. It's so interesting. Was that what you found in your journey as well, that alcohol and drugs or whatever else, other addictions, was just sort of like a manifestation of whatever was going on underneath the surface?
Well, I think, for me personally, and for a lot of people, but definitely for me personally, firstly, it was about escape. It was about trying to silence what was going on inside my head. That was a very noisy and a very crowded place. There was a hell of a lot going on inside my head. And that was, through reason of different things. But I guess, looking at what that escape is and escape was for so many years, and it's just so evident now with so many people that I work with around what that is. And it's whether we're escaping the relationships we're in, whether we're escaping the shit job that we're in, the different challenges that we have with that. It's all an escape. I'm someone who connects deeply with the work of Gabor Mate when he talks about, addiction and the challenges with people with addiction isn't the actual substance itself. It's the reason we use substance is the challenge that we need to get to, right? But you look at our community and why our community and why it hasn't worked for so long, 230 plus years since the date of colonization. The challenges within our communities, we have the answers to fixing our communities. It's as simple as that. It's just we've never been resourced to be able to do that. And that top-down approach doesn't work. If I walk into your household and tell you how to live, or your family how to live and what to do, and say that's going to fix your house and your life, then you're going to say, "Shut up, Joe. You know nothing about my family." Yeah. The challenging thing with our communities is that we get dictated to from Canberra. When it comes to, we always talk about, the billions of dollars that goes into the First Nation communities around closing the gap. And, we look at, incarceration, education, life expectancy, all of those things. When we're looking at the billions of dollars that goes into our communities, we need to start having a look at where the billions of dollars is going, because it's not going to our communities. It's not going to our communities. It's not reaching the ground. 3/4 of the money that gets pushed into the Aboriginal Affairs budgets goes to non-Indigenous organisations. With that top-down approach, what doesn't work, right? So, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that if we're wasting billions and billions of dollars in taxpayers' money, why don't we ask the people who's impacted the most in how to fix it? Right. It just makes absolutely no sense. When we're talking about this sort of stuff, our communities have the answers to what's best for our communities. Without doubt, there is some challenging times that have been had and some challenging experiences that people are going through. But how we look to manage those need to be from a communal perspective and a communal approach. And, Johan Hari talks a lot about in his book, Lost Connections. And I read that book and I just had our community at the front of the mind. Talks about how we're so disconnected as people. And that's the reason why we're all looking to escape. Right, paraphrasing, of course. But, it's dead in the center of what's going on with not just our community, but all communities. Like the disconnection that we have within our family home, our family unit. The old school sitting down at the kitchen table to have dinner and talk to your kids about how their day's been, or what school's been like, or the husband and wife, how they or the family unit of what that looks like, how their day's been and how they're interacting. Like we don't have genuine conversations with each other anymore because we are so disconnected because of the isolation that technology brings us. Right. Technology has done some fantastic things without doubt, but it's disconnected us so much where people would rather send an email than go and have a conversation with someone. It's ironic that we're sitting here on a computer screen now,
on a video call.
But right. But you get exactly what I mean. Like
100%.
a lot of what we did, we've evolved from groups of people. Like we've evolved from people that hung out in groups that did things with, for, and to each other. Right. And we're just getting further and further and further away from that. And that's the very reason why we're so sick as people. And Lost Connections documents that beautifully. In his TED Talk, Johan Hari's TED Talk as well, that talks about, the challenges. If you just type in Johan Hari TED Talk, there's probably few that come up, but the one that has, you know, millions and millions and millions of views is exactly around that. You know, the unexpected cures for their anxiety and depression is around connection with people.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So it's really interesting that you bring all that up. What did that practically look like in your life? What was that kind of, I don't know if you call it that sort of connection journey, that healing journey that you went on? Because, you know, the other element to your life is that you had this whole like professional sporting career, both with playing rugby, NRL. I'm from Melbourne, so we call it rugby. I don't know if you guys call it footy. But
I'm in Melbourne at the moment. We could have done this in person.
I know. I didn't realise. And then boxing as well. Like, was there a huge like identity shift that had to happen? You know, it's something that I hear people talk about a lot. Was that like a big part of it as well? And did that come through that connection piece, or was there something else that added into that?
I think it comes through authenticity.
Yeah.
Right. Is that there's so many of us that aren't truly being authentic to who we really are because of the society that we walk in, the jobs that we walk into. And that was no different for me. You know, I had to fit in to a system when I was playing sport. You know, boxing was a little bit different because it was more of an individual type thing. But, you know, your team, you know, you put your most trusted people around you with your team. You know, it's a really connected place. And whilst, you know, being in a sports environment and a team environment is a connecting place, that's why I go back to, you know, it's not just connection, it's authenticity.
Yeah.
Like being truly authentic to who you are. And I guess taking the blindfold or the blinkers off around substance, how it was for me for many years, was that authenticity. Right?
Yeah.
So I whenever I put an alcohol or drugs into my body, it turned me into somebody who I wasn't, or I was using that to escape.
Yeah.
Right, the challenges that I was going through, you know, mentally, emotionally, and personally. So, authenticity is the big one, right?
Yeah.
We because we live in a society where we have to fit everything, everything of what we do. Think about it. You know, you walk into an office, you got to be there at a certain time. You can't walk in there in board shorts and you know, wearing board shorts, no shirt, and a tie.
Yeah.
You just can't do it, right? It's frowned upon. It's looked down on because there's standards there. There is, you know, expectations of what we need to do and how we need to do it. So authenticity, actually, really, I was someone who's a little bit left, like a little bit. I'm different. I'm different. I know I've always been different. But I also, that's not just because, you know, I grew up with different colored skin than everyone else. You know, when we're talking about football and the environment of football, I didn't particularly fit the I guess the what's the word for it? I guess your standard of what that was.
Yeah.
Like I'm different. I listen to different music. I'm a muso. I like art and theatre and you know, things like that. I'm a different guy. I've always been that. And it's about, you know, I guess sitting in and sinking into your authenticity, what that is. You know, and again, we speak a lot about, and this is I guess a podcast around addiction and so forth like that, but we speak a lot too about Gabor Mate. He talks about authenticity so much.
Yeah.
You know, the need to escape. You know, that's the biggest challenge that people are having from day to day. Instead of looking at the need to escape, we need to start to build places where we don't need to escape.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Whether it's our workplace, our family homes, all of those types of things.
So what did that moment look like for you? Like, what was that breaking point in your life? Like, obviously, you know, things can get pretty low, and I imagine you had a time where you had a realization, or maybe it was an accumulation of like lots of little things. I'm not sure, but take us back to that sort of, if you like to call it, that darkest moment where you went, fuck, something needs to be different here. I need to change things up.
I guess the darkest moment for me is fairly well documented now with the work that I do in the mental health and suicide space,
Yeah.
And I guess as a bit of a trigger warning for people listening, my darkest day was the day that I attempted not to be here anymore.
Yeah.
I did everything within the power of my two hands to not be standing here.
Yeah.
And something bigger than me kept me here. And after that realization, it was like, holy shit, I got something bigger going on here. I just tried to not be here anymore, and it never worked.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something bigger here for me, and it's call it your rock bottom. That was without doubt, the toughest place or experience that I've ever had mentally and emotionally. And I guess the only way's up from there, right? So it's been an accumulation over many years of just building who I am and what that person looked like. Let's not forget as well, that happened in 2012. So 11 years ago now. I was sober for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Right. I was clean as well. Clean and sober
It's an
for a lot of
interesting
years.
point. It's an interesting
right.
point.
So it's not as if you for me, it was like I got rid of alcohol and other drugs. I got rid of the substance. And hindsight's wonderful, right? But I look back and it was like ripping the Band-Aid off. Like the noise just went sky high after that.
Yeah.
So for me, it was about, and again, hindsight, I didn't have these realizations till many, many, many years later.
Yeah.
But I was using alcohol and drugs to silence what was going on inside my head. I take away the alcohol and drugs, the noise goes sky high, and I've got to come up with some tools to be able to manage that, and on the back of, marriage separations and, family breakdowns and separations from my kids and, things like that. An accumulation of hurt and discomfort and not having the normal means of dissociating with substance. I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Like there's speaking with many people that fortunate enough to survive suicide throughout the world. The amount of times that I've heard people say, I didn't want to die. I just didn't know what else to do to make the pain go away.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an important point that around, even just around recovery. Like the next day when I was out of that really tough and critical time of being in a deeply immense emotional pain, suicide was the furthest thing from my mind.
Yeah.
The next day. But when I'm in that moment, it just seems so close to that you can touch it.
Yeah.
Right. So I've noticed that for me, and again, looking back with time, persistence, education, learning about myself, learning about what my triggers are, learning about how I'm feeling physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually, looking at all of the aspects of what that is, and just putting in, I guess, mitigation around making sure I don't get to those places again.
Yeah.
And I have those tools now. And for me, it's sitting around a fire, being around close family and friends that understand the challenges. I have, and I say this all the time, like our people, for thousands of years, we had 10 psychologists sitting around the fire.
Yeah.
We just didn't have a piece of paper we didn't have a piece of paper on the wall to tell us that's what we were.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the benefits of knowing about people mentally and emotionally, and just sitting with those people in a beautiful place of empathy and not silencing and validating what they're going through, can do amazing things for people's recovery. So for me, it's been a journey, man. It's been a real journey of learning, understanding, and walking with who I am. And I can look in the mirror and be comfortable now.
I'm just really interested to kind of get the insight, because it's such a great point that you make around you know, being sober and clean and not using any substances and still getting to that place mentally. And it's something that we try and talk a lot about on this podcast. Obviously, it's about alcohol and drugs, but people don't realize that it's not really about alcohol and drugs. It's about like kind of being happy, and the alcohol and drugs, as we've talked about, is kind of a manifestation or an escape for that pain. You know, like what were some of the big realizations that you had to do, like in terms of like what have been some really big actions and steps, and I don't know if it's habits or therapy sessions or those campfire sessions, or yeah, like what were some of the big like realizations and insights and practices that you implemented to get you out of that place when you were there as different coping mechanisms?
And I think, you know, one of the biggest things that we get taught and told as First Nation people is that to leave the place better than we found it. Right. So, and that means many things, you know, about walking country. It means about looking after country, but it also means about the people that we love and interact with the most, our young people, our kids, right? One of the most powerful conversations I ever heard, and it was relayed to me by his childcare teacher, was at like daycare. My young bloke, my eldest boy, who's now almost 19, he said, they were having a conversation with it, you know, with all the young kids, as young kids do, and they were talking about, what beer does your dad drink? And my eldest boy, he said, my dad doesn't drink beer, he drinks water. Right?
Yeah.
And that is one of the most powerful things. That observation, that he was in daycare, so our kids know what's going on in our family home.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, my biggest growth has been who I am, not just as a man, not just as someone who's clean and sober, but who I can turn up and be as a dad,
yeah,
and a partner, and be proud of that. Because for a long time I wasn't that.
Yeah.
I can openly, vulnerably, and honestly say that. For a long time I wasn't that person. Right. So it also takes many years of learning to walk in those worlds, and you can't do it when you're off your head, right? You can't do it. Like your inhibitions and your actual clarity around who you want to be or who you got to be and who you are being are three very different people.
Yeah.
And you can't do it when your mind's just out of it with alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
You can't. So for me to be the best version of me, I can't put substance into my body.
Yeah.
And if that means it's what it is to model to my kids,
yeah,
right? And you know what? My kids will get to the point where they go out and they do that. You know, I've got an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 17-year-old, a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, and 6-year-old, right? So the younger three aren't yet at that stage, but they will be. They'll get to that point, right? And what it is like for me as a dad is building those conversations or building those relationships where you hear it so many times. If my dad or my mum catch me doing this, they will kill me.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to be that dad.
Yeah.
I want to be that dad where my kids go, not dad, I'm getting on the piss. I want to be that dad where my kids go, Dad, this is what happened last night. We did this at a party, and I feel comfortable to be able to talk to you about it. And then without me losing my absolute bananas, because my story and everything that I've done and touched all throughout my life is for the world to see in my book and so forth like that. So I can't ever judge my kids when I'm talking about this sort of stuff openly either. Right?
Yeah.
We want them to make better choices, without a doubt. But I can't judge or silence my kids. I need to dig into that and go, all right, well, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
What's not what's wrong with what you're doing. What do you feel is right about what you're doing?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, why is it making you feel like this?
Yeah.
And what is that place of why you need to escape that?
Yeah.
Right. It all comes back to a place of what we're needing to escape. Why can't we live in a world where we don't need to escape?
Yeah.
Right? I want to create a family unit where they don't need to escape. They know that they can come to me with their deepest and darkest secrets, and they can have those conversations without judgment from dad. And it doesn't mean that dad's heart won't break or won't be upset or won't even be angry. It means that dad will have some empathy and some understanding and possibly some tools to be able to help you through it. I'm not going to judge. I can't judge.
Yeah. So interesting. I love that philosophy as well, because it's like the bigger conversation that almost has to happen on a national level as well in society about drugs and alcohol, to open up the space rather than stigmatizing it and making it this like taboo kind of thing that people can't come and talk about.
We can't say it's taboo. We also can't say it's taboo because it's on the TV every night.
Yeah.
It's major sponsorships throughout the country.
Yeah.
Right? It is documented as the biggest drug problem Australia's got is alcohol.
Yeah.
So we can't ever say that alcohol and substance use is taboo because it's everywhere. Yeah. Right. So that is just it's a backhanded comment. And I'm not having a crack at you, but I'm saying it's a backhanded comment to even suggest that like it's so we can't ever get cranky at our kids for wanting a lifestyle of alcohol and drugs if we are modeling alcohol and drugs to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can't ever be grumpy or be upset or disappointed in our kids if they want a life of alcohol or drugs, if we are modeling a life of alcohol and drugs.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. I would say, like, my feeling is the way that alcohol and drugs is spoken about in society, like what you're saying, and that's kind of what I meant. It creates this, I feel, it creates this environment in whether it happens within that family unit that you're talking about, but also like on a national scale where people can't be open and talk about what's going on for them because they're going to be labeled and jumped on or, made to feel a certain way. And it actually breeds more, more issues, because of,
I think it's two separate conversations as well.
Yeah.
Is that what we just started with a minute ago was saying that kids being, or kids partying and drinking and taking drugs, experimenting and so forth, like, is taboo. But then you just went to the point where we're talking about feelings and emotions. I 100% will advocate for people to make sure that they talk about their feelings and emotions. And that is the taboo thing that we're talking about. Like, people won't talk about their emotions. But here's the thing, right? How can you be comfortable in talking about your emotions when, since you're this big, you've had your emotions silenced?
Yeah.
So stigma isn't out in community. Stigma is how we talk to our kids every single day.
Yeah.
By silencing emotions. When they're babies. Telling them that didn't hurt. Pull your socks up. Grow up. Toughen up. Wipe the tears out of your eyes. Like, children are just going through an evolutionary process of brain development and struggle to communicate their needs. And we silence that.
Yeah.
Because we're adults, right?
Yeah.
And why it's so triggering to us is because we didn't get validated as kids too. So stigma, this whole stigma conversation, all right, about, we need to silence the stigma and we need to talk about mental health more. What we need to do is create safe spaces of validation in our home to our babies and our young people who then grow up and don't need to look for the answers down the eye of a bottle.
Yeah.
We need to create family relationships where we can comfortably sit with our parents and say, you know what, I'm not doing too well. I need to have a conversation of what this looks like.
Yeah.
Without our parents saying, "Oh, you'll be right. It's okay."
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so fascinating and so interesting. So you did explain it a little bit, but how do you have that conversation with your kids? Like, obviously you just have the conversation, but is it, talking to them like with a bit of a mix of, like how do you hold the balance of being a parent and sort of somebody there that's listening and holding that space, as you said as well, because I think that's a really
sometimes we can get into trouble as parents. I'm not sure if you've got kids, right? But sometimes we can get into parents and because we're the older person, we're supposed to be the more mature person. So we're supposed to have all the answers. Supposed to, that was the key word. So we're supposed to have all the answers, right? But sometimes we don't have the answers.
Yeah.
Sometimes our young people don't need answers. They just need somebody to sit there and hold space for them.
Yeah.
So that's some of the biggest illusions that we have with being a parent, is that which is hugely detrimental to the young people's well-being, is because we always seem to want to have an answer. And when we don't have an answer, we put this expectation on ourselves of, holy shit, I don't know the answer here, so I'm just going to silence what they're going through and not validate it.
Yeah.
Right? So what we need to do as parents, how do you learn to be a good sports person? You go out there and you get skills and you learn off good coaches and you watch TV about different things and you educate yourself around different things.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the best experiences or the best journey that I've been on is educating myself about how to work with young people better.
Yeah.
Like how to converse with my young kids when they're crying what I think is the most minor little thing. But my kids don't go, "Oh my God, Dad, I'm emotionally being let down here by you. I need you to hold space." How can kids say that? Most adults can't even say that.
Yeah.
Right? So what we need to do is start to learn about how we have these conversations with our little people, because broken little people grow up in the bodies of broken big people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You don't just grow up and that stuff goes away.
Yeah.
Right? 99% of our community today that we walk around and we see all hold little secrets and challenges of the way that we were raised in our communities. Yeah. And 99% of it is all around emotional validation.
Yeah.
So we need to have, and again, you're a podcast about addiction. Where do you think addiction is born?
Yeah.
Like, addiction is born through escape.
Yeah.
How do our kids escape? When they try to tell themselves not to get upset at things.
Yeah.
It's a form of dissociation. It begins in childhood.
Yeah.
And then we're continuously dissociating from what we're going through. And then we grow up to be young teens and adolescents. And we're escaping through experimenting with alcohol and drugs and, oh, this feels okay. Then I get involved in relationships and then I'm latched into a trauma bond because I wasn't raised right with my mum or my dad, and the cycle just continues. Then we have then we grow up and have kids and we don't validate their emotions, and they're in their exact then they are in the exact same cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So addiction for me, I had a conversation recently around, good and bad people. I said, there's like a person I had the conversation with said, there's just bad people in the world, Joe. And I was like, I don't believe there's just bad people in the world, because people aren't born bad.
Yeah.
People are taught how to be bad through their experiences.
Yeah.
And all of those self-soothing behaviors that we have as young people grow into addictions as older people.
Yeah.
Because we're doing our best to dissociate from challenging times. And the best way to do that when we're an adult is go to the best, most potent legal substance you can find.
Yeah.
We get completely out of our mind every weekend.
Yeah. So can I ask then, with that, to maybe drop in a little bit personal and just kind of ask you a pointed question? What were the things that you were trying to escape from when you were drinking and using? Like what were the main things that you've realized that you were trying to avoid and get some relief from?
Yeah, so it's well documented, the research now around concussions. For me, the very first time I can recall the negative voice in my head telling me that I was worthless, that I would never amount to nothing, and then progressively got worse to talking and planning thoughts, plans, and ideas of suicide, was on the back of a concussion.
Yeah.
Was in the back of getting my head knocked around, on the footy field every weekend. And for me, I signed my first NRL contract as a 13-year-old kid, right? And then as a 14 and 15-year-old kid living in the country, I was playing first grade footy, where my brain just wasn't developed properly, and I was out there playing against men, getting banged around every weekend. Yeah. So it's got to have an impact on the chemistry of your brain. And as I said, it's well documented now, the research around, the challenges that the concussions bring to a person, the person's mental health, with CTE and the, the behaviors associated that impact our mental health. So, for me, for a long time, I was using substance to silence the voice that was going on inside my head, telling me that I was worthless or I'd never amount to anything and that I should die.
And like, when those thoughts are happening, like, are you believing it, or are you kind of like fighting against it? As strange as that might sound for people that maybe haven't experienced it, but like, are you fighting against it and believing it sometimes, and then going back and forth and just in this battle with yourself? Or is it something that you kind of aware that's going on and you just kind of can't stop it, but you're just confused about what's happening?
So do you know much about the organisation I founded back in 2014? The
mental
health organisation. So my mental health organisation that I founded back in 2014 on the back of, firstly, my suicide attempt and psych ward stays, and learning about, the brain and different things, mental health and stuff like that, is my organisation's called The Enemy Within.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was. It was like an enemy that sat there inside my head that forced me to fight every single day.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I used substance to escape that, to silence that, like many of us do. And then when I got sober and I started to sit with that, for a long time, I hated the person looking back at me, because that person believed those voices inside my head, right? But now I can sit there and be comfortable in the person I am. Doesn't mean that it's not still there. That conversation still happens. It's just I've got the tools now to be able to quieten down what's going on inside the mind. It's actually really ironic. I'm just as I finish this up, I'm jumping into an event which is around contemplative practice, which is all about mindfulness and meditation and slowing the mind down. So learning to sit with yourself in presence, and the benefits that can have is just exponential for our well-being.
Yeah. It's so interesting to just hear you say those things out aloud, because I know for me in my journey, the thing that like blew me away was I'd heard people's stories about their drinking and whatever before, but it was when a guy like you said to me, this is kind of the voice, the internal dialogue that's going on in my head. This is how I'm feeling. This is, how you describe it. This is the enemy within that's going on and happening. It just like blew me away, and just like kind of was the thing that helped me to like trust, that maybe things could be better for me as well, So yeah, that's why I wanted to pull out and just hear you talk about that stuff, because I think like so many people experience that, and it's the beauty of podcasts and the organizations such as yours that are out there these days that can share these messages and really connect with people on on a deeper level with that lived experience. It's
It was back in 2014. Back in 2014, where all of this was birthed, right? It was on the back of the launch of a short film in Wagga, in the Wagga Film Festival, and we called it The Enemy Within, right?
Yeah.
This was back before people spoke about mental health publicly. Now, I was just come off the back of my NRL career. It was 2 weeks out from, a week out actually. The film festival was the week of me fighting for the WBF World Title in Wagga, which was a big deal for Wagga, right? And like, it was like, wow, this guy has done this with sport. He's still doing this with sport, and he still battles with what's going on inside his head. And the amount of people that come up to me and was like, Joe, what you just spoke about, I go through the exact same thing. I've just never had the words to talk about what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And what it did for so long, I never once professed to be, a professional or a therapist or anything like that. But what it did was it gave people strength to be able to talk about or accept what they were going through, and also normalize what they were going through.
Yeah.
Right. The amount of people that come up to me and say, Joe, I go through the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Was incredible. So, I just felt it then my duty to be able to, help people, and the more I helped, the more it helped me. And that it was important very early on in the piece. I learned that you can't give from an empty cup. You've got to keep my own cup full, to make sure that I'm doing the right things to help people first. Because if I'm not well, I can't help anyone. Yeah.
Well, mate, I've got to say, you're a fascinating guy with a lot of wisdom that, just even as we're talking, like so sometimes, I have so many of these conversations and do this stuff for work. You can even, I'll talk about me. I can disconnect from it from times, but just talking to you now, it kind of, it reconnects me to the whole like journey of healing and all the stuff that goes on. So it's a very powerful message that you have. Where can people find you? Where's the best place if they want to check out all the work that you do?
Mate, for me, probably my Instagram is the most active thing, which is Joe Williams _TEW. So Joe Williams _TEW for The Enemy Within. Or then there's the work. My Enemy Within page is at The Enemy Within _. My Facebook page is The Enemy Within, suicide prevention, mental health and trauma recovery education. I'm on all different platforms. My website's joewilliams.com.au. But I've recently just founded a charity called Our Way Academy, which works with young people between the age of 5 and 12. So primary school kids, helping all kids to be the best, First Nation kids to be the best version of themselves, and build tools to be able to have a strong foundation throughout their life.
Amazing, mate. Amazing. And like you spoke about in the podcast, help to end the cycle of, the brokenness that can start and hold the space for people. It's very cool. Very cool.
It's a challenge, but we just got to do the best we can each day in modeling the best behaviors that we can.
Yeah.
Some things will start to come up. It's like the onion layer. Everything. You get comfortable and then you go a little bit deeper. But it's all worth it in the end.
Yeah. Amazing, mate. Amazing. Hey, thanks so much for coming on, and I'm glad we finally we got it to work. So I'll link all of that in the notes below, everybody, and hope you take something out of it. And I'll just drop you in it. Hit Joe up because he's a star. So reach out if you need help. Have a good day, everybody. Peace.